New world conditions. Trump has started manipulating.
They are losing a huge number of people. 82% of Ukrainians demand an agreement be signed.
Erdogan is summoning Putin for a talk. Deadline until 2027. The US is leaving NATO.
If the bill is passed, the US president will be required to notify NATO of the withdrawal within 30 days, and funding for the alliance from the American budget will be prohibited.
Lavrov's masterpieces. Putin's talking horse once again dazzled with his highly intellectual knowledge.
The Kiev regime has turned from an ideologically charged combat unit into an organized criminal group.
Russia is the best ally for the US. Tucker Carlson made a new statement.
Because it's the largest landmass in the world with lots of oil, gas, minerals, gold, and everything else. It's the perfect ally.
Moscow is losing money and losing yet another partner.
Part of the oil from the giant Kashagan field and Astana is being redirected toward China. Thus, Moscow will not only lose money from the transit of Kazakh oil, but also gains a new competitor in the fight for the Chinese market.
The height of cynicism. The occupiers, those who have taken control of the territory and established their presence, are now facing significant challenges and resistance from the local population.
A new season is dramatically opening at the historic Mariupol Drama Theatre, a location tragically remembered as the site where hundreds of innocent civilians were once brutally killed during a devastating conflict. This choice of venue carries profound symbolic weight. Simultaneously, former President Donald Trump is making headlines by threatening to initiate a significant war against the South American nation of Colombia, raising international concerns and tensions. In another development, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is reportedly summoning Russian President Vladimir Putin for a stern discussion, effectively calling him on the carpet to address pressing issues between their countries. Lavrov stated that Russia never intended to attack Ukraine and promises not to attack Europe. He is even ready to sign some kind of paper, apparently for credibility. About this and more. Coming up in our report, and after that we'll return to the studio.
Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Boston. In dozens of U.S. cities, mass protests took place against the peace plan proposed by Washington, which, according to participants, effectively legitimizes Russian aggression and forces Ukraine to accept Moscow's terms. American politicians also joined the mass protests opposing Trump's policies. For example, in Chicago, Congressman Michael joined the protests. Quigley.
When authoritarian regimes try to erase an entire people, the world has no right to remain silent. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past, and we cannot allow Trump to force Ukraine to accept a false peace dictated by Moscow.
Americans are very dissatisfied with Trump's policy toward Ukraine. If the 47th President of the United States began his second term in office with the support of 47% of the population, then due to the peace agreement, or more precisely, the effective capitulation of Ukraine that the White House is trying to force Zelensky to sign, Trump's approval rating has dropped to a historic low. It's not just ordinary Americans who are dissatisfied with the peace plan. The agreement has met with significant resistance in the Senate from both Republicans and Democrats.
Putin has spent the entire year trying to make President Trump look like a fool. If administration officials are more concerned with appeasing Putin than achieving real peace, then the president should find new advisors.
This capitulation agreement is unacceptable for America, Europe, or Ukraine. It was written by Putin and benefits only him.
Trump constantly threatens that the U.S. will withdraw from the negotiations if a peace agreement is not signed in the near future. But in reality, he can't do that, at least not until the U.S. midterm elections, for the House of Representatives and the Senate in November 2026. Because his approval rating is falling and support is declining, which means even more so, Trump won't dare to anger the voters.
He has already damaged his relationship with part of his own audience, with the so-called leaders of the MAGA movement, because of the Epstein Files case and the scandal surrounding their publication. Accordingly, if he now announces that he is completely washing his hands of Ukraine and forgetting about it, he will ruin his relationship with the conservative Republicans, the traditional conservative Republicans, who may keep quiet but still have quite a significant influence within his own party to this day.
Trump wants peace agreements and wants all the glory to go to him, and anything that doesn't bring him personal benefit doesn't interest the president. In turn, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated in a recent interview that he holds a pro-Ukrainian position in the negotiations and assured that Ukraine has good prospects and that without security guarantees, a peace treaty will not be signed.
Theoretically, if everything is done right, in 10 years, Ukraine's GDP could surpass Russia's GDP. That's what's needed. Stop the war, make sure they are never invaded or attacked again. Protect Ukraine's long-term sovereignty and independence so that it does not become a puppet state. They are truly independent and sovereign, and this allows their economy not just to recover, but to thrive and turn into a success story.
Ordinary Americans are taking to the streets in protest. Senators and congressmen are already openly expressing their disagreement with a peace deal, and even Trump's closest circle is against making concessions to Moscow. Meanwhile, the 47th president is talking about the need to hold elections in Ukraine. But if he doesn't listen to those around him, he himself might not make it to the end of his presidential term. In the United States,
Journalist and blogger Roman Cymbalyuk is joining our broadcast. Hi, Rom.
Hi, Vadim.
Rom, please tell us, in your opinion, what is happening right now in the White House or in Washington. In general, why or what is the reason behind Donald Trump's increased activity? What do you think is behind, once again, those statements that he has been making over the past few days, particularly about the 82% of Ukrainians who supposedly demand presidential elections in Ukraine, even though statistical data shows the opposite? How does all this? We'll get to that in a moment. Let's start with this part first. Please give me an answer.
Yes, well, it's all very simple and obvious. The American president screwed up. He promised to stop the fighting and couldn't deliver on that. He couldn't make Vladimir Putin stop the war. So now he's telling stories about how Zelensky here is somehow not right, not good enough. And let's hold elections. Actually, I think that 100% of Ukrainian citizens want to hold elections, preferably in such a way that it complies with all constitutional norms. That is, we would have held the elections on time, but back then Trump hadn't yet promised to stop the war in 2 minutes. And accordingly, the fighting, martial law, and everything related to it. So, in all these words, as far as I'm concerned, we are seeing nothing but the weakness of the American president, which is not appealing. As we saw in the report, accordingly, American citizens need to do their part. So, Donald Trump is responsible for peace here. He told us himself that everything would work out, so go ahead. But only Russian fascists are dragging him down because of his orange hair. And actually, if you analyze what they're saying now, Donald just looks like a bit of a clown because Donald is barking here at Zelensky while Vladimir Putin simply states publicly from his Kremlin bunker, "We killed him, we want to keep killing." So that's basically the situation. There are some hints from time to time. American officials are starting to say that if nothing works out, then as we see now, sanctions against Russia, blah, 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 but it's hard to believe in that. And of course, I ask myself, why is that? This is how the states are acting towards the Russian Federation right now. There is actually an explanation for this. At one point, I asked about this information in G5 chats. As I understand it, American policy is now being conducted based on this answer. The answer there was that if China seizes all the resources of the Russian Federation, then the United States will automatically lose the war for global leadership. Well, probably this straightforward, let's say rather simplistic answer is what they're basing their foreign policy on. It's just ChatGPT over there. It doesn't take into account all the options and all the scenarios in this difficult matter.
Tell me, please, how does this correlate with the internal situation? I'm not talking about domestic policy, but specifically about the internal situation. So, there are public opinion polls. For example, the Reagan Institute conducted one, which showed that the overwhelming majority of Americans, at least among the participants and respondents of that poll, support continuing or even increasing aid to Ukraine. At the same time, Trump behaves as if he is acting against his own potential voters. These are the people who, one way or another, will influence his future or the future of those around him as early as this fall, in 2026. And what's interesting is how the support is distributed. The vast majority, both among representatives of the Republican Party or those who hold Republican views, and the vast majority among Democrats. In this case, everyone is basically united. Americans are saying that Ukraine should be supported. Trump thinks differently. How come? Well,
the so-called secrets of democracy. I actually think that if the fighting doesn't stop before the start of the new political season, then Trump will be forced to adjust his position toward Russia, because that would mean they're simply giving away all possible elections. There's already been a first warning sign. They had elections in some districts, and everywhere the Democrats won. It's not that they're anything super special or unique, but people are just looking at What did he call Biden again? Sleepy Joe, and now he's Sleepy Donald, and people are drawing the appropriate conclusions. So from the point of view of common sense, once again, it's all pretty much the same. Maybe it's just that the American administration, they said something about corruption in our country, but when Americans start looking into the legacy of the current president, there will be some serious questions. Why did Donald Trump's eldest son become several times richer in the first year of the presidency? What happened? Where did he suddenly get such instincts from? Well, actually, that's called, Americans sometimes call it lobbying and sometimes corruption. It depends on the situation. All sorts of planes accepted as gifts and so on and so forth. So, well, it's clear that the American president will have problems both at work and at home. It's just that we are faced with the choice to survive here and now. That's why we keep an eye on the States. We work with that country. And let's just note that, in fact, we've been fighting for a whole year without American support. And as it turns out, that's possible. And if that's possible, then maybe Trump isn't as great as he kept telling all of us.
Maybe that's the case. Look, not so long ago, if I'm not mistaken, the day before yesterday, Trump made a statement saying that he wouldn't mind meeting with representatives from Europe and Ukraine, but before that meeting can happen, some issues need to be resolved. He doesn't want to waste his time. And then a report from Axios appears saying that representatives from the US, Europe, and Ukraine will meet on the 13th. That is December 13th. So, does that mean all the issues have been resolved? Or at this stage, is it possible to continue the dialogue? What do you think?
I think it will be some kind of technical meeting, a meeting, one of the rounds of negotiations of which there have already been hundreds. When he said, we don't want to waste our time, he meant that he wouldn't go to Europe to deal with this. But Donald will be stable and consistent in this regard. When did you invite Putin to Alaska? Nothing was discussed there either, nothing at all. It wasn't worked out at the level of experts and professionals. No decisions were prepared. That didn't stop you. Maybe European leaders should spend less time on Donald Trump. Maybe that's how the question should be put now. Moreover, as far as I understand, in the latest negotiations, there was a phone conversation between the leaders of the most powerful European countries. As far as I understand, they're already starting to snap at Trump and tell him no. In other words, if before everyone played this game of giving the American president as many compliments as possible, now the tactic will be a little different. Then Donnie will be told that if you don't help stop Putin, then your opinion in this process becomes either zero or even negative. So what's the point of talking to you then about all these topics?
Okay, Lavrov has spoken up. The so-called Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation voiced several points, in particular that Ukraine must maintain a neutral and non-aligned status, because it was precisely in this status that Russia once recognized the independence of the state of Ukraine. Although, well, really, what business does Russia have with us now if we are a sovereign state and make decisions independently? That's not the point. Should this be considered as additions to the plan that has already been announced, which now has 20 points or maybe 28 points at some point, and so on? Or is this just general informational noise created by Lavrov and other Kremlin representatives, just so as not to reveal the real situation in this peace process, in the negotiation process? Yes?
Lavrov has basically turned into a talking loudspeaker. Frankly, he's just blatantly rambling. And anyone who's even a little bit aware of the situation would say, Sergei Viktorovich, are you out of your mind? Here you are telling everyone how you recognized Ukraine as an independent state. First of all, we don't care about your position on this matter. This is also something that needs to be conveyed to Russians somehow. Secondly, what he's doing is basically justifying the war and the invasion. Although even in the way he puts it, there is at least one contradiction here. Ukraine was a non-aligned, non-nuclear, neutral state. Ukraine still remains a non-aligned, non-nuclear state. If the Kremlin's stable boy is hinting at the Ukrainian constitution, where the preamble states our goal of joining the North Atlantic Bloc, let me just remind you of the sequence of events. First came the attack on Crimea and on Donetsk and Luhansk. Only after that were changes made to the constitution, not the other way around. So it was like this. When you are a non-aligned country, and Russia, also known as Parasha, guarantees your independence and sovereignty, and then it attacks you. But this reaction, absolutely, predictably and logically, you start reaching out to countries that can support you and help you. Well, yeah, it seems like an obvious thing, but he keeps repeating it not because he doesn't know. He came and broadcast to us from our territory. It's considered that this way he seems so smart. Now he's going to tell everyone that Russia supposedly has real reasons for why it's killing people in Ukraine. Well, listen, they used to say something like that. Something like about protecting Russian speakers, but at the same time, they're killing and wiping Russian-speaking cities off the map. Now, those places are silent, actually. There's no one left there because everyone either died or it's simply impossible to live there anymore. So there's nothing new in Konya's words in this regard. I mean, this is their narrative. They just keep repeating it for 11 years. Actually, it's almost 12 now, ever since 2014, about the so-called coup. So I think, well, fine, there was a coup, our coup, as you call it, our revolution, a coup to you. But these are all events happening in our own country. But I could go on about this for a long time, even basically show you exactly where Kon is lying. For example, for 8 years, when we were supposedly bombing Donbas, as they say, Lavrov would meet with European leaders and always said that an agreement had been reached between the Ukrainian opposition and accordingly Yanukovych. Then this agreement was torn up by some strange guarantors. So where's the inconsistency? That was February 21st, 2014. How many years have passed since then? And the operation to seize Crimea, they started it the day before, officially, and even engraved that date on the medal of the Ministry of Defense. And there are plenty of such moments that prove that Sergei Viktorovich, damn it, is talking nonsense. There are really, really a lot of them. So, of course, all of this critically important information needs to be carefully considered. But overall, we just need to provide unwavering support for our brave armed forces and engage in diplomatic discussions with our international allies in order to significantly augment arms supplies.
Yes, Roma, I misinformed both you and our viewers and listeners regarding 82% from Trump's statement. He said the following, that Zelensky needs to be realistic, that there haven't been elections in Ukraine for a long time, and that they are losing a huge number of people. 82% of Ukrainians demand an agreement. They want an agreement to be reached. This isn't about holding elections. Well, although, again, 82%. All right, I wonder where he got this article from.
It's all in this same context. All right, well, let's put it this way. I would say it's not 82%, but 100% for us. Although we want elections and we want agreements to be reached as well, all of that is true. Donald, you understand everything clearly. But you're not mentioning the main point. What kind of agreement and elections, under what circumstances and in what situation? The Russians now are framing the question this way. In order for them to slow down, as they promised to Ginger Donny, Ukraine must withdraw from Donbas. But if you pose the crucial question in this particular way, then we absolutely have to leave the Donbas region without any firm guarantees that the Russian Federation will not advance further into our territory. And are you ready for such a deal? Something tells me that even all sorts of crazy beauty bloggers could figure that out. Wait, so there's no guarantee they won't reach Ivano-Frankivsk, and we won't be able to shoot all sorts of cool makeup videos there? Because Russian soldiers will come and we'll have to run to Poland to do beauty business there. Well, you know, maybe for some people in these circumstances, it doesn't matter as long as we just stop shooting right now. What happens tomorrow doesn't matter anymore. But on a larger scale, that's what it's all about, and for us too. When he criticizes Zelensky about the election story, saying he's illegitimate, that he doesn't meet the expectations of his people, we need to make it clear that this story isn't about individuals. Here in Ukraine, we're not an empire. Our presidents have changed and will continue to change. But Ukraine was, is, and will be. But those guys from the United States, the hunters of rare earth metals, pretend they don't understand this, or maybe they really don't understand anything at all. It looks like some kind of giant corrupt scheme.
And more often these thoughts come up, these and the idea of idiocracy. And every time I try to push this thought away, I try to keep it out of my mind. But for some reason, it keeps coming back again and again. Okay, let's keep following how things develop. Rom, thank you very much. Roman Cymbalyuk, journalist and blogger, joined our broadcast.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.